Good morning, my dear negotiators. Today we finish our mini series on how to boost the perception of procurement and negotiators. And we do it with a controversial topic, and it is being more controversial. But before we do that, let's quickly kick it off with the intro.
Are you looking to up your negotiation and procurement skills? You're in the right place. Welcome to Procurement Zen with your host, Phil Kowalski.
Alright, so we finish our mini series on how to improve how others perceive you, and this last part, as I said before, is about being more controversial. So if you want to have a look at the previous parts of this 5-part series we have done, it was part 1, having a killer profile, part 2, develop thought-provoking ideas, part 3, step up on stage, part 4, be your own brand, and now we are in part 5. So if you want to look at these previous parts, make sure to go to procurementzen.com/047. That's procurementzen.com/047. For episode 47, we list all other parts and all additional resources there. So this final part talks about being more controversial. In general, this goes very well along with the other parts of the mini series because it helps you stand out and sharpen your profile. If you consider, for example, part 2, developing thought-provoking content, how many of your colleagues have done that already as described in that part? Or do you know of any colleagues that have a private homepage as described yesterday? Well, I think being controversial is maybe like the royal class of this whole perception thing. Because, yes, it is difficult, but nobody said it will be easy. If you want to improve the perception and if you want to proceed in your career and if you want to bring your whole procurement organization and negotiation organization forward, you have to leave your comfort zone. And yeah, I know that's a buzzword, but that's unfortunately an inconvenient truth. So how can you be more controversial? Basically, I see 3 ways that you can use in your everyday business life. First one is speak against a common truth. You cannot do electric vehicles in a fun way. Well, I think you can, said Elon Musk. You cannot do commercial space exploration. Well, let's see, said the same person. Or a smaller example, redlining, this is the way how to deal with the contract. I don't think so, said I. If you remember the part 2 of this miniseries, I showed an example where I've created a different way of dealing with contracts, taking it out of MS Word's track change mode. This raised a little controversy because people were not used to it. I showed I'm not progressing the human race as such with such an endeavor, but it surely was a way to progress our organization, to have a leaner, smarter way. So that is the first thing, how you can raise a little bit of a controversy, doing things differently. The second one is talk about taboo topics. Do you remember any of the extremely successful United Color of Benetton campaigns? They mastered the art of touching taboo topics. If you remember that poster where a priest was kissing a nun, very controversial, but it kept people talking. And I'm not saying you need to do this kind of extreme stuff, but we humans have a genuine interest in taboo topics. They draw our attention to it. So in a negotiator's life, this can be addressing subtle but unacceptable behaviors of your suppliers. When you do this, others will compliment you for your will to stand in the fire and outright address unacceptable behavior, because most of the time it is just subtle, it is slightly, but everyone is annoyed at it. And if you go out and say, Jim, I'm sorry, but your tone is simply not acceptable, and I'm not willing to go on in communication with you if you are not willing to change your tone. That is controversial, very controversial. And it's also usually a taboo to address this in a negotiation, but it has to happen. And believe me, when you do this, once you experience this, of course, don't make it up, but once you experience this, that others are behaving in an unacceptable way, stand up and speak for your own truth. That usually is something that people rarely do. And it helps you to stand out. Another example of is there is a hard line between procurement and sales. Why not involve ourselves in sales discussion? If sales markets and sells parts of the products that we buy for our company, let's cross that line and talk to the sales guys. Usually it's a taboo. Procurement is procurement, sales is sales. They do not interact with each other in the same company. Why not? Why not? Let's do that. And the third measure is to open a debate. So there are a lot of options for this one. A few years back, I developed an organizational maturity matrix, which we will maybe cover in a future episode. And that basically read, how well prepared is your organization for professional procurement? At that time, the level our organization, our demand owner organization was in, was, well, to keep it friendly, very controversial. And that opened up a lot of great discussion, often starting with, hey, what is that on the wall behind you, where I posted basically that model and where I see ourselves. And this is a massive credibility booster because it goes so far beyond, can you negotiate that rate count for me, please? So we have seen quite a few examples of how you can be more controversial, but there are some things you also need to consider. And it's basically roughly 5 rules you need to consider when being more controversial. First, always be controversial for a reason, not just to fire up an argument. Second, if you are relying on data, information, or sources, make sure to double check them and that they are correct. Third, don't be a copycat. Try to be unique. Don't use something a person in the next room has done and just copy it over. Try to be unique here. Fourth, be objective. And that may be the hardest commandment. And fifth, have respect for people that see it differently. That's also very important. So we learned about 3 ways of being more controversial with the 5, well, let's say, baselining rules once you start a controversy. And that basically finishes up our mini series on how to boost other people's perception of you as a negotiator. As always, you can find everything over at ProcurementZen.com/047. That's ProcurementZen.com/047 for episode 47. And tomorrow we start with a new discussion about digitization. After that, we will for sure have a mini series about negotiation. Very interesting. Really looking forward to that one. But until then, I wish you always happy negotiations and see you tomorrow.